forbid you are sitting in this place saying, I don't care about legacy. You need to care about it because somebody's got to live in the life you have. You are passing something down whether you want to or not.
Hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to the Mindset Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Sam Velazquez, and I am super pumped because today we have a good friend of mine and a special guest who I'll introduce here in just a second. But if you're joining us for the first time, just know we are all about building mindset mastery when it comes to our faith, marriage, family, and in your business, and improving in any way we can. If we can just move the needle a little bit, that is the goal. We do not have to do it overnight. And it's not something that we should want to do overnight because it takes time, practice, and perseverance. And so embrace the process as always. But with no further ado, let me introduce our guest. If you are American, her name would be Maritza Barron. But if you are not American and maybe of a Hispanic background, it would be Maritza Barron. And I'm so pumped because we've been wanting to do this for a little bit and life gets busy. And the truth is you just make it happen when you can. So Maritza, I am so excited. And before you speak, I want people to know this because Maritza and I have known each other for a good minute. And she's going to share more of this. So I don't want to steal her thunder, but I've been watching her because that's what people do. We watch each other from afar because of all of the technology. But she's been out there crushing life. She's got 2 books. And I'm going to say this now so we don't forget. I'll make sure to get all of the links from her, all of the things that you would want or need so you can have quick access to those resources. But she's just out there conquering life. I know she's been moving. Has a podcast she just recently launched and is just going after things for the kingdom. And listen, we may not be as direct here all the time on the podcast, but the reality is this: I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I love Jesus, and he is the source of all that I do. And so I know she's out there conquering in the faith world and for just the community that she's involved with and bringing so much value. So I want to share this story, though, because to context, and I think it's funny and relatable for the listener to know this. And maybe it's totally not relevant, but it's funny for us. And we're the ones talking, so we get to talk about what we want. And the last time we were together, Maritza was coming over. This would have been probably about a year ago or so.
Yes.
And she was coming over on a Sunday for lunch, and we were just going to get together with my family and hang out and catch up. And literally the morning of, our septic system backed up. What's crazy is we had horrible weather. We weren't even sure if she was going to come. And thank God our church service was canceled, because had it not been canceled, our whole house would have been flooded with sewer. So our septic system backed up. We got it temporarily fixed. And then we're like, Maritza, do you want to come over still? It's going to be like being on a mission field. And she's like, perfect. I'm an expert at that. So that was the last time you were here. And it's so funny because we had to walk across the street to a little local church to use their bathrooms that we had access to, thank God, because ours didn't work. Anyways, that's the last time we physically saw each other. And I think that's pretty funny. But anyways, I want you, if you would, I need to get off the soapbox. If you would, though, I would just share whatever you want, whatever is on your heart. But we were talking earlier before we started recording in regards to kind of 2 pillars of this podcast, which is faith and business. And you were sharing a little bit about where you were when we last talked to where you are now, and then how kind of fear of failure and poverty mindset played a role in, I don't know if they played a role, but they were a part of your journey and facing those things and coming them. Maybe you could kind of give us an overview with that, and then I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about after that. So stage is yours, girlfriend.
Oh, awesome. Wow. Honestly, I am like laughing over here so hard because of everything you said of last time I saw you and what was happening. And then even just the conversation that we had at the table. That was really fun. I miss your family and I love your family, Sam. I just hope you know that I just honor you and your family. You guys have been a significant role as much, here for the listeners. I feel this is really important, is that sometimes, even though you don't see someone all the time, just the impact that either you can make or a person can make on you, and just also the honoring, even though we don't see each other all the time. I just want you to know that, first and foremost. And it's not just because you're having me on the podcast. That's first and foremost. And then, yes, everything else in regards of what you were saying of where I was at. And we'll definitely talk about the fun stuff in a second. But
we want the fun stuff.
Oh, of course. Like the part of like the mission field okay, let's just go there and I will touch on what you said. The mission field, when you said that, it's so true. So I have gone on 5 different mission trips, and what was so fun, I remember that when we were at the table at your house and you asked me where I was going or where I was from. I think that's what it was. And I said, Southern California. And you said, so practically Mexico.
Yes. And that was a stereotype for the audience, but it's also partly true.
You know what? It is, because soon after that, little did I know I'd be leaving Oregon and I'd be in Southern California, and I'd be driving in the outskirts of LA. And yep, I've been to Mexico. And so absolutely, I immediately thought of that comment and how true it was. But yes, I am Mexican, so I can say this as well. And so, yes, my name is Maritza Barron in Spanish, for those of you that can say it. And as far as just where I was, like I said, I left Oregon. I was in California. I had this intense journey. It was very difficult, I will admit, but I am here to say that it was well worth it. It was well worth stepping out of my comfort zone, being out in Oregon. So where I was when I last saw you, I had already written 1 book and it was already published. And I was about to release my 2nd book, which I did release it this year in April. And I just remember that I was in this season of, I know there's something more for me, but I don't know exactly what it is. And I know I hear the Lord. You brought up, yes, that you are a Christian, you love Jesus, and so do I. And I was just in that season of, I know there's more, and I know there's like an impact to be made, but I was so full of fear. I just clearly remember that I was so full of fear, and stepping away from everything I knew and everyone I knew was one of the hardest things I had to do in my life. But in this journey of leaving Oregon, being in almost Mexico, and now I'm actually out in Tennessee, it was a journey of letting go of the old mindsets, but also overcoming that fear. So thank you for sharing everything you said of where I'm at now with my podcast as well. It's called Mystery and Beauty. But also with the writing, I am now also working in television. I don't think a lot of people know that. But it's something that was never on my radar, and I would have never imagined that. Thing is, I had to overcome fear of thinking I was not enough. I don't know. Do you have a lot of that, Sam? Do you hear a lot of people that just stepping into whatever they're called to do? I know that you do on like business coaching. Do you have a lot of that, of like people thinking they're not enough?
I think that's a great question. I think that it's truer than we even hear, because when we think we're not enough, if we're hearing about it, we're only hearing about it from the few people who are ready to decide that that's not true. And so they want to start making steps forward. But I think in context, there's probably more people who don't express that because they are so afraid. And so because they're already thinking they're not enough, they can't even share with someone that is a struggle because it's like they're not even worthy of sharing their struggles, which is pretty crazy to think. And I don't want that to be true. However, I believe it's truer than we even realize. And so I think there's tons of us, and I think all of us at some point, to include myself, go through that in some capacity, and some maybe more than others, but in some level, we always find ourselves in a position, regardless of maybe you're just starting out or you're in the middle of a journey, or you've even reached not the pinnacle, but you've kind of reached a milestone or a marker. And even then you get there and you realize, oh my gosh, there's a next level. And now I feel like I'm not qualified for that. And I almost wonder if we tend to look at that as something bad. However, I think that on one front, from a mindset mastery kind of thought, is I think God designs it. We are enough. We're intrinsically enough. So I'm not saying like I'm not valuable. My identity doesn't matter. Like God doesn't. No, I know that. But we're also human at the same time. And so we're always going to be kind of in a position where, yeah, there's actually truth to that, is we're not enough because He alone is enough. Meaning I can't do it on my own. And I'm going to need God, and I'm going to need people around me who are better. They're more not qualified, but they have more learning experience. They've gone before me. And so I need to learn to pull on them and realize it's okay to feel like I'm not enough, but it's not okay to let that determine my course of action. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes. Wow. Thank you for that. No, yeah, that's exactly where I was, though, is, feeling that and knowing that there was more. And I felt at the time that God was showing me, Maritza, Maritza, you're more than just someone that's going to write a book. I knew I had this calling of stepping into actual authorship, being an author, because I had more books. I'm actually working on my third one and about to finish the manuscript and have it sent to editing. But I realized it's stepping into business as an author, selling books, but also making an impact with speaking engagements. And I realized I was so fearful of failure as well. And here's the thing, I love that your podcast is Mindset Mastery as well, because as I look back now where I'm at, and I realize it was overcoming bad mindsets, or just mindsets that were not useful, like poverty and fear of failure. My perspective of even the outlook in life that I had was very bleak. That sounds horrible to say now that I'm saying it out loud. I'm like, wow.
Actually, no, it doesn't. It doesn't sound horrible, and here's why. As I'm listening to you talk, right, I'm realizing something, and I want to interject here because I want the listener to not just hear common things, meaning like, oh yeah, I relate to that. So we relate to so many things, but then have you ever related to something but then walked away and then been like, but I wonder what the actual variable was, right? So for instance, you are expressing common things like fear of failure or poverty mindset, or, just knowing I had to recalibrate my thinking. And all of those are good things. They're very like positive sounding. However, it doesn't tell us what those things were. So maybe for the listener, like when you're expressing fear of failure, maybe like what were you, like what was that for you? What did failure in your mind at the time look like?
That's so good. Okay, well, at the time, I would say that how funny. It's as simple as like falling down on my face, and I was not going to be able to afford living and feeding myself as an entrepreneur. That's one, that my books were not going to sell and that no one was going to read them, which, by the way, is false, because now I know how it's impacted, even if it's one or two people, it's worth it. But the fact that I did it as well has been worth it. And also realizing that even though things might have not come out perfect or the way I imagined it, because rarely in life does it ever, I'm assuming, is that regardless on whether I made, like I was successful or not, it impacted in life. And I feel like that is the success in itself. And even though things, like I just learned John Maxwell's, I keep hearing the failing forward right now. Failing forward. I didn't realize that that was something I needed to do, is learn how to make mistakes. That's what it is. Fear of failure for me was making mistakes. Now that I think of it, wow. Yeah.
We, I think we're, well, not to get super nerdy in science, but like the idea of mindset or mindsets, because we have mindsets. So there's subconscious and conscious. And so a lot of the times our subconscious thinking's kicking in all the time, and we don't even realize it because it's just what we call, second nature. It's because it's a habit or a behavior that we've either built or we've heard, right? Something was said so many times in our mind as a kid, as an adult, whatever, from any stage, right? It could be from a business stage, it could be from a church stage, it could be from, a series of books, it could be from a parent, a family member. And we build these patterns and don't even recognize it sometimes. And so we've been, I believe that fear of failure is as big as any of the obstacles we face. I'm gonna keep myself from going on this, like, I don't want to start preaching at people about fear, but I will say this, is that failure has been something that I think commonly for people is looked at as something negative, because we attach failure to this idea that it's not good enough or I'm not enough. But I think people who are successful or people who have the right mindset, let's just put it that way, they understand that, like the John Maxwells of this world, they understand that when we fail, it's the catalyst for growth. Because if we don't attempt something, or Wayne Gretzky, famous hockey player that maybe most people aren't aware of, but he says it more simple, like layman's term, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Well, that's cool. But it's easier to just not attempt something for most people, because then they don't have to face being accountable for not making the shot. But the truth is, I would rather know than not know, but that's a lot harder than most people realize. And I'm a believer in what the word says. So it says that there's nothing new under the sun. However, I do like to pretend that I came up with this acronym for fail. I've never heard it before until I started saying it probably 5 years ago, maybe more. But fail, if people can look at fail, right? Whether you have fear of failure, just remember this: to fail is a faithful attempt in learning. It's a faithful attempt in learning. The only way for me to learn is to fail sometimes.
Yes.
And so I'll end it with this, because I want to get back to what you were, your kind of story and your process of all of that. But it's funny to me because, I know you're not married. I'm married. I have 4 kids. So it's kind of like, I can't imagine not having kids, because I was so wrapped up in thinking I'm going to fail as a father.
Wow.
Nothing in me was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I just it just kicked in. You don't know. But the truth is, right, there's probably more times that I've failed than I was perceivably successful. And I say perceivably because we think that a fail is a bad thing. But if I'm not willing to make the mistake, I'm setting my kids up for a horrible subconscious behavior down the road. I want them to see my mistakes. I want them to see that I don't get it right. And that, I put it this way to be simple. It is my first time being alive today. It is my first time being married today, being a father of 4 kids between 7 and 15. Today, it's my first time. So possibly know what's going to exactly happen and that I'm going to get it all perfect and right, instead of just trusting the process. So just remember, to fail is a faithful attempt in learning, and it is the catalyst for your success. And again, you measure success however you want, Success just, you have a better scope of the knowledge and experience you have to know how to better move forward. Like, man, what an thing. And you can be secure in who you are now. And that to me is
Yes.
success. When you start to recognize your purpose in life and why you exist, why God chose and picked you, that's success. And then all the rest just happens. But anyways, off the
Come
soapbox
on.
again.
All I can say is I think I should have been listening to you like way back when. Because I had to, I mean, I am grateful though that I had to walk through the process not having heard what you're talking about right now, you know, of what failure is an attempt in learning, right? And I actually wrote this down before we even got on a conversation because I was praying about this yesterday, like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And when I wrote down about like perspective and fear of failure, I also wrote down that I had that negative attitude, and it was realizing. So I said negative attitude versus the opportunity to grow versus seeing things as a challenge and learning. So this is so cool. You're sharing like exactly what I wrote last night. Because this is something I had to learn in the process of leaving Oregon, leaving my family, leaving even the jobs that I had before, you know? So that right there is what I realized is I didn't know what I was capable of until I left Oregon. I didn't know. Like I remember actually what was so funny is in the fear. I remember one time going to church while I was actually out in Oregon, and I remember going to the store beforehand and seeing a sign and it said now hiring. And I remember being like, you know what, maybe I'll just do that. I'll just start working at a grocery store and I'll just do that because I know I can do that. It's quote unquote security. I just remember thinking this. And that day, I went to ask for prayer. And I remember this person was like, you know what, Maritza, you're either going to believe God and you're going to believe that he says you have a calling on your life, or you're going to just go and work at Safeway. Little did this person know that I actually had this thought about working at a grocery store. Instead of taking that leap of faith and stepping out to see what I was capable of, to see what my purpose is and learn, right? And it's what you said about, I don't know who said it right now, of the taking the shots you don't take, right? You'll just never know. Well, I'm glad I took that shot. I'm glad I packed my car and just started driving. And here's the thing. The fear of failure for me at the time was, where am I going to live? How am I going to eat? Because I didn't have a job at the time. And there were a few nights that, yes, I did sleep in my car. A few nights where I just remember being like, where am I going to land? Like, I don't know where I'm going to live. Because it was the process where I had I wanted to plan everything, but it was the learning in the moment, learning how I was going to, I don't know if the word is react, but like learning how to make decisions on the spot as well. And that, again, I was so scared. And yes, there were so many tears in the process, but looking back, Sam, I'm so grateful I did it. I'm so grateful because now, yes, I can see the impact that my life has had on people, even to be honest, even like younger teens, in like girls in their teens that look up to me and I'm like, why? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I know why. It's because like I've started to show confidence versus fear, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been amazing to realize that there were mindsets that I needed to remove. And that big one was that negative attitude versus gratefulness, along with the whole um, seeing failure as something bad versus an opportunity to grow and learn.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so good. So good. Yeah, that's, it's funny because as you're talking, I'm thinking about commonly. So in the faith world, right, there's this concept of divine order. And so, and I trust and believe it, right? God doesn't do anything not in order. Everything is in perfect order. And he has it that way for reasons that we think we fully understand. And then we find out later there's more to understand. But either way, it's in
Mhm.
order. And so when we venture out to, and I think it's funny because I think especially for people who, we're all in process, we're all trying to break mindsets that are,
Mhm.
that we didn't maybe, bring on ourselves, but we may have perpetuated or agreed to. And then to unbreak those, it's not that it's difficult. It's just that it requires like a whole new level of thinking. And so it's what's hard is that it's so much easier to conform to what's
Mm.
comfortable. And even though it's not a good mindset, I know what I'm going to get. And so I just stay there because it's like, well, at least this is the worst that's going to happen, right? And I can
Yep.
predetermine and dictate, or not dictate, but I can predetermine and, forecast like part of my life a little bit. So it's like, well, if I stay here, I have this job, I have this paycheck. It's just easy to conform to that. And why would I go in what seems to be the opposite direction, which is like, hey, leave this part of the country, drive to Tennessee, live in your car for a couple of days. This is the plan that I have for you, and that's just not common. We're not like, yes, this sounds amazing. Now I know there are those people who that is exciting to them. However, most of us normal people, that's not exciting. And the
Thank
truth
you.
is,
Thank you. You think I'm normal. Thank you. Sorry.
yeah,
Keep going.
well, yeah, I'll edit that part out. I don't think you're normal. No, I do think you're normal. However, it's just that we want to have everything mapped out in such a way that we know the outcome, but that's not then faith. And the funny thing about like
Correct.
fear of failure and faith and these terms we throw out there so loosely, I think, especially as someone who believes in what the Bible says, we don't take time to really think about it because of our actual subconscious mind. So we've heard it enough. We're like, oh
Mm.
yeah, faith. Oh yeah, fear. Oh yeah. But we're not really thinking about it. And I was sharing this with
Mm-mm.
someone the other day and I said, what's funny is what we're wanting is to feel hopeful, right? Who doesn't want hope in their
Wow.
life? We want to feel like, okay, I'm having faith and I hope this works out. Okay. That's what we say. I'm having faith and I hope this works out. Okay. The only problem with that
Yeah.
is when we look at divine order, the Bible tells us that before hope, okay, before we get to hope, it says that faith produces character. But before we get our character built, before we get worked on, before we have to do the learning, the growing, the tough stuff, it's met with trials, tribulations,
Yeah.
storms, the unknown, the uncomfortable, the things that aren't fun. However, those are the
Yes.
things that actually get us to hope. And we want
So good.
hope without any of the stuff in the middle, the things that we share, the things that we call our testimony. But the truth is
Yeah.
that's like, hey, wait a minute. If I'm in a storm, if I'm experiencing failure, this is an opportunity to grow. It's like, man, what's going on? I don't
Mm.
like it. God doesn't say, hey, you got to like this. You got to love it. You got to embrace all of it. No, but he wants us to know that it's necessary in order for us
Yes.
to get through the divine order that he's put into place, because when we come out on the other end, he wants to know that our character has grown. He wants to know that our character has been
Yes.
gone from here to there, because, as you alluded to as an example, there are going to be those, whether they're young teenagers or adults or other people in business or people aspiring to start, they're going to feel like, I can do this. And it's not just the story of hope. It's not where you were and now look at where I am. It's that you can unequivocally let them know that when they're in the storm, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not like,
Hmm.
hey, try to get out of that, or hey, do this exactly right so you can avoid these mistakes. And that's a common marketing thing we
Correct.
say. And we should want to help people avoid maybe common mistakes and help save time. And so I'm not saying that's all bad, but we have to be careful too, because maybe I'm subverting their journey and God's wanting them to actually
Yes.
experience some of these things because it's going to help them become more refined in the process. And so, anyways, all that to say, for
Absolutely.
divine order, we have to be willing to, when we have faith for something and we start to take action, those things tend to not be like peachy. We're not just going to get from A to
No.
Z with no obstacles, challenges, or what, the Bible and Paul says are trials and tribulations. I mean, like,
Correct.
nobody's like, trials, tribulations, sign me up. Is there an e-course? And so we're like, but it's part of the process. And when we learn that, when we go through it enough, we start to realize and grow. And I think, you talked about this shift in your mindset from authorship to being an entrepreneur, and, seeing yourself not in a higher position, but seeing yourself as fully capable because God's given you everything you need, all of the tools He's equipped you with before you were even born. And they're not even things
Come
you have
on.
to particularly earn. However, they are things that you have to learn that you have. And I think that that's the foundation for. I have a coach and a mentor. He talks about this all the time, and it's so much more illuminated to me now, the way he puts it, to see that in the very beginning, like, this is the kind of the system that God put into place for us, is that we're to, we want to have everything, but rarely do we want to become something. We want to have it, but
Wow.
we don't want to have to become something. So we can then
Wow.
do the thing we need to do, so we can eventually have what it is that He has for us. We just want to
Wow.
have what He has for us without becoming the person He has already made us to be. So
Yep.
we can do the thing that He's created us to do. So then we can have what it is He already has for us. And that is so
Absolutely.
challenging. Because I just want to have, like, God, can you just give me everything that you have for me? And He's like, yes, I can. I just need you to become who I've made you to be.
Come
And
on.
that takes a lifetime.
It
I
does.
don't think we become who we are fully meant to be in the entire time we're here on earth. And we're always drawing nearer to that. And in the process, we
Yes.
do more, not in the sense of busyness and looking, but we're more effective in our doing. Let's put it that way. And then God starts
Yes.
to bless us. What He already has, He releases, so we can continue to become and do and have more.
Absolutely. Everything you're saying, I just love this. I didn't think that I even had anything to share about this with in regards to family. You mentioned you having your family, and I don't have one right now. And the thing is, as I'm hearing you, it's so amazing that we want the things He has for us, right? But we don't want to go through the process to become. Oh man, okay, this is so like such a brutal truth on my end. Because it's like, wow, Sam, I am seeing like the word appreciate. Like, to appreciate. We don't know how to appreciate the things He gives us if we don't become, if we don't go through the process of building character. And I see that even like for myself, I've been wanting to be married since I was like a little girl. And now, as I'm hearing you, and I've learned this within the last year, I had such a poor attitude of woe me. And as
Mm.
God started working on my mindset and my character, and realizing, okay, because of the process and because of where I'm at, I'm learning to, instead of having this woe me attitude, woe me, self-pity, mindset, I am learning to now have this lens of gratefulness through the trials. And this gratefulness, I didn't have it. Like, to be grateful, seriously, I've realized, God, thank you that you led me through this season of not knowing how I'm going to eat, not knowing where I'm going to sleep. But I've not once gone a day without either a roof over my head or my car. And so I was always protected from the elements. And but to be grateful of the trials, I never thought I would say that before, right? In the midst of it. And on top of that, in the midst of these storms, like I was just reading scripture yesterday evening of when the disciples were in the boat and there was a storm, but Jesus walked on water to arrive and come into the boat. What grabbed my attention is that it was actually in the middle of the storm that the disciples got to see a miracle, Sam, like Jesus walking on water. That's what grabbed my attention. And I was like, wow, how many times do we miss miracles in the midst of storms because we're so, and this is me, I was so guilty in the process of walking. Like we talk about, well, yes, we believe in faith. Well, yes, the Bible. But when we're actually walking out and living out what scripture tells us, I actually complained a lot. So in the midst, I complained and I missed some of the miracles that God was working in me during that season. Now I can look back and see them. I'm grateful. I've learned to kind of get off of my soapbox too, and realize that in the end, what God is doing is he's working in me that I may be able to carry out the calling, to carry out, the entrepreneur, to carry out even any kind of like leadership or, and the blessings, like everything he has for me. I'm positive that at this point, whenever that husband comes, I'm sure I'm going to be able to appreciate more than if it would have happened. Like I would have been married a year or 10 years ago. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
It's probably not you, Maritza. It's probably because you're a fierce Mexican woman and your husband needs lots of preparation. So it's not, God's not waiting on you anymore. It's just that man's going to need a lot of tools. I'm just kidding. No, I do know what you're saying.
I'm speechless.
Well, as a half Hispanic person who's Puerto Rican, I vowed, like literally in the small time in my life that I spent with anyone on my dad's side of the family, because my parents divorced when I was young, but like I vowed even as a child, I was like, I will never marry a Puerto Rican woman ever, because my experience was they were crazy. My aunts were crazy. And so I didn't. I married my wife now of almost 18 years and she's as white as they come. So no, I love her. It has nothing to do with her skin color, but it's just a fact. She's white. So anyway, but no, I think what you're saying is it's funny and it's true. And it's, when you're talking about miracles, for the listener, two things run through my mind. One, we can say what the Christian world says is Christianese. We can give the easy Bible answer, like,
correct.
Miracles are everywhere, which is true. But I did also have that almost thought was like, man, well, listen, if you need a miracle, just listen to yourself breathe in, breathe out. That's a miracle. Like you're alive. Like God picked you of all the people to be here. And we can make it about the environment we're in, or we can make it about how we're going to respond, knowing that he chose us. And I get it. There's plenty of things to respond to negatively or ungratefully or with an attitude that's kind of, we could use terms like victim mentality and all of that stuff. And we're all susceptible to it. The difference is when we start to shift our mind, we realize there's so much more. And we take the things that are commonly seen as negative and we use them as the springboard, the catalyst, the thing to propel us into what we know God's called us to do. Now, the thing is, it doesn't mean we get to avoid it or ignore it. We just learn how to navigate it and quickly respond in a way that's more favorable, not just for ourselves, but ultimately to benefit the people around us. Because I don't believe God gives any one of us a dream or a vision or a purpose to serve ourselves or even our immediate family. it's going to always be well beyond that. It's going to be for people we've never met, people we may never meet, but it's going to have an impact well beyond ourselves. And so it's so critical to realize that all of the things we've talked about, fear of failure, poverty mindset, is my challenge would be to myself even is like, we have to continue to take time to really ponder things, take time to think about what it is that maybe a principle's telling us, whether it's a biblical principle or just a principle that you've heard from someone else, because there's nothing in the Bible that says you miss, every shot you don't take. There's not, it doesn't say that. However, I think that if we took time, that principle's in there in the sense that, it would be more equivalent to faith without works is dead. So you can believe for every shot, but unless you take it, you actually work towards it. And I think that's but a great example of kind of your journey up until this point is, for the listener, it's like, I'm thinking, man, okay, here's Maritza. She's sharing where she's been. She's sharing where she's at and where she's going. But in between that, having faith and trusting, you were still moving, right? You were still taking steps. And I think that's what's very hard sometimes, because we want to take a step, or what we call take action. And immediately we want that action step, no matter how big or small, to produce results, to allude to an outcome. And as soon as it doesn't, we just go back to believing. And it's like, okay, that's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just limited. And it's actually so limited that God says it's dead. Like you might as well just not believe, because at this point you're just sitting there hoping. And I heard this from someone, and they were talking about how it says like, hey, don't worry, I'll clothe you and I'll take care of you. Who am I to, not take care of you when I take care of the birds, right? That's, in the Bible, it's talking about this idea. But I never thought of this, because it says true. God says that he feeds the birds. However, it doesn't say that he goes into the grass, grabs the worm, brings it up to the bird's nest and puts it in its mouth. It doesn't say that. And so it's like, oh God, what a profound revelation. And yet so simple. And, that is the reality if you believe it, right? And I do believe the Bible. I believe it literally. And I understand there's metaphors and all of that in there, but I literally believe what it says. And that it's literal. And so we too need to have and take action for what we're doing, and not by the lie that if it's not, because we say this, massive action. Okay, fine. I don't care if it's massive or tiny. Just keep moving forward.
Correct.
Just keep taking a step. And everyone's steps are going to look different. Everyone's timing is going to look different. For everything, there's a season. And so sometimes we have to spend time in our moving forward, also recognizing what season we're in. And so that's just part of the process. And we want to avoid, we live in a culture and society. I believe this more than I used to believe it. And I'm not liking how much more true it's becoming, because I don't know that it matters what arena you're in, whether it's the church, faith-based stuff, business, secular world or not. The human nature side of things is similar, right? The belief may change, but the behavior is very similar, is that we want to have the results and the outcome way more than our willingness and the desire to grow, learn, and process has changed a ton. And I've spent a good amount of time really researching this, looking, talking to different people, having conversations. And I think that in and of itself is a huge barrier for people. And I wasn't going to share this, but I'm going to share it anyways, because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I want the listener to know this. And because we were talking about this the other day, that every known disease falls under 39 subcategories. Every known disease. In the Bible, it talks about Jesus was whipped for our transgressions, our sins, and all sickness and disease. 39 times. What is the chance? What are the chances that he was whipped 39 times and every known disease falls under a subcategory of 39 different subcategories? The reason I'm using that example is because I want to use that in the parallel for our mindset. Because God tells us that he's not given us a spirit of fear. And we've been talking about fear of failure. So you can't have failure. Like if you have failure and not fear, then you see it as catalyst. You see it as opportunity for growth. You see it as a springboard to the next destination. But if you have fear of failure, why would you have to have fear of failure? Why would we want to be afraid of something? Right? Instead, it says he's not given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. I talked about this on a podcast a while back, and it's so critical because we think we're saying we have fear of failure, meaning I don't want to make a mistake. No. You have fear, therefore you're seeing failure as something negative. And I've not found it, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong. There's nowhere in the Bible that I am aware of where God specifically and expressly states a spirit that he hasn't given us. Because I believe God's not given us a spirit of doubt. I also believe he's not given us a spirit of, anxiety. He's not given us a spirit of, fill in the blank. I believe that to be true. But the only one he expresses he's not given us is a spirit of fear. And this is why the 39 comes into play. I believe fear is the nucleus of all spirits, that everything else falls under that. Is fear. Because it's something that drives every course of action. Fear drives my belief for something that may or may not be true. So that's why failure is seen as something bad, because most people have fear on the front of it. If you take fear off of that, it's just failure. Well, what is failure? Failure is not like you're bad, you didn't do a good job. It means that the attempt you made wasn't successful. Well, we better tell Isaac Newton to quit. We better tell Elon to stop trying, as if he hasn't made mistakes into, progressing forward. Could you imagine what we wouldn't have in our, on this earth that God's given us to be stewards of and to cultivate, to subdue, take dominion, all these things? That's why he's given us power and love and a sound mind, because power is our authority. He's given us authority over fear. Okay. Love is unconditional, meaning I have access to God. I know we talk about love in the construct of what is love, but I'm challenging people to think about who is love, not what is love, who is love. Define who is love before you start trying to figure out what is love. We will go sideways every time. So it's who is love? He's given me God. Literally, I have access to him. And then he's given me a sound mind. Well, the antithesis of that is a double-minded man, okay, and or woman, right? Talking about humans. A double-minded human is unstable in all their ways. And he's not given me that. But if I'm operating out of fear for anything I do, I'm unstable. Because I'm not in my own, I'm not in a sound mind. Because I'm now living in fear. Anyways, for what that's worth. So fear, I believe, again, there's no theology to support this necessarily. There's nothing that says, hey, this is exactly where it says fear is the nucleus for all things demonic and or of evil spirits. But I believe it is because, and remember this too, because I've heard it and I just want it to be squashed for people's mindsets. Fear is not false evidence appearing real. I love acronyms, but it's not false evidence appearing real. Fear is simply what God says it is. It's a spirit. It means it is something that is moving to and fro in an unseen world that gets into our thinking, that gets into us, and we operate in it because of, you name it, subconscious thinking, whatever it may be, we open the door to it. And I'm not here to get into the whole demonic and all that. That's absolutely not what this podcast necessarily is about. It is, however, about mindset mastery. And in order for us to have a mindset that we begin to master, we probably should start subjecting it to the master. And we're subjecting it to fear. And so when I understand I have the authority, I can then subject my mind to love, who is God. And in doing so, I will have a sound mind.
Oh man, this is like so just what I've been learning, right? The whole the opposite of fear. I don't know, Sam, if you've heard this a lot, but that faith over fear. But I realized, no, actually that's not the truth. The truth is that love, perfect love casts out fear, all fear, right? So love is really, and I, again, I love that you said that who is love? And that is like my first book, the title of it is Loved by Love. God is love per scripture, right? And I realized that I was so full of fear in my life, just in general, not just in this last season, because I felt like I was unloved until I learned that I am loved by God. So I am loved by love himself. And most recently in my second book, and it goes back to, like this whole fear of failure thing and overcoming it. My most recent book, I have a chapter, the one that is already released. I have a chapter called Confidence in Him. And I actually haven't had a chance to share this with anyone yet. And it actually, this chapter is chapter 8. My book is 10 chapters. So I did not write this book in consecutive order. Chapter 8, which is Confidence in Him, was my last chapter to write because I was in a season where I felt like I was unable to speak into this because I felt the opposite of confident. I was so full of fear. I was so full of fear. And I love that chapter because that's where I realized that God spoke to me. He highlighted, I can't remember right now off the top of my head because I don't have my Bible in front of me either, is that there's a scripture in Psalms where David himself is saying that the unfailing love of the king is what keeps him unshaken. And that's where I remember parking and realizing Maritza still needed to learn how to be loved by God because it's his love that would cast out all fear so that I can walk confidently in this season. And like I said, I just released this book this year. And so when I saw you last, I was still learning what this whole confidence in not just in Christ, but confidence in life, right? Yes, I can take this next step, even if I fail, even if I don't know where I'm going, I can take this step because I am loved. And I don't have to have that fear. Like you said, he does not give us that spirit of fear, but power, love, and sound mind. And for myself, I had to learn how to really stand firm in love, in God's love for me, to know that I know that he's not going to let me fall. And if he lets me fall, that he will pick me up, right? Like he's going to pick me up. He's not going to let me stay on the ground unless I chose to stay on the ground. Totally. I hope that makes sense to I hope that makes sense even to the listeners, because it goes back to what you shared about the birds. Like, I mean, we have the option and the choice. I could have just fallen flat face on my, flat on the ground on my face, back in California and not moved forward, being fearful because I didn't have a job and I didn't have a place to live and all the above. And I could have chosen at that moment. And I did. I promise you, I remember being in my car and being like, do I just go back to Oregon? But so I had the choice. It was up to me. But realizing that God said that he loves me and that he has something for me, it was my choice to keep moving towards the east instead of going back into the comfort zone. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps.
So good. Oh, yeah, it makes complete sense. And listen, I think kind of as a take-home message for all of us is that, and especially for those of you who may be and come from like a church background, you understand the Bible enough. You're what we're saying is resonating to you maybe quicker than it would for someone who doesn't know the Bible. But I don't think principally it's not resonating with everyone. But is the take-home message would be this, and it's a challenge to myself, to us, to whoever's listening, is that sometimes we will fall down when we think we really need help. We fall down like, oh my gosh, I got to get, in the Christian world, we fall on our faces before God is what we say, and we cry out. And I believe there's a time and a place, and we posture ourselves that way. But if I'm doing that because I'm like, oh my gosh, but I'm not taking the steps of faith, if I actually put in the work, God's saying, listen, you're getting on your face before me saying, hey, I need help. And you haven't even taken the step. And he's saying, I'm trying to help you by saying, trust me, take the step. Because guess what? When you take the step, the probability that you or I are going to fail is extremely high, meaning that we're not going to get it perfectly right the first time. But here's the cool thing. When we take the step of faith, we actually end up positioning ourselves in the exact same position we're in before we take the step of faith. And that is when we fall, we're now in a position for him to say, oh, thanks for taking that step. Let me pick you up, encourage you, love you, and give you the courage to take the next step. But when we always come to God before we've even taken the step, what we're saying is, God, I need your help. I don't trust you. And we need to get past that and say, God, I trust you. I'm going to take the step. And when I fall, guess who's going to meet you there? God. And he's not meeting you there because you failed. He's meeting you there because he wants you to know he's proud of you. Good job. He's not like you failed. He's like, all right, now let's do it again because I got way more for you. And it doesn't become necessarily something we ever get to avoid. It just becomes a mindset mastery habit we build because we realize the truth. And that is that God is always going to be for us. He goes before us, and he already knows when we're going to fail. So instead of coming to him on our faces because we don't trust him, start standing up, walking in a direction. So when you fall, he can pick you up, but he can't pick you up because you're choosing to fall on your own before taking steps of faith instead of taking steps of faith. So when you fall, he'll pick you up. That may not make sense to you, but re-listen to it a few times. I think it'll hit home. You guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Maritza, I am so glad we got to do this. It just gives me so much joy to have these conversations and do these podcasts. Again, as always, if you are tuning in, go ahead and sign up for that free email, a free coaching call, wherever it is you are in your journey. I'd love to help connect with you. All of the links are in my show notes, but specifically be looking for the links that I'm going to be putting in this particular episode, Maritza, of your book, your podcast, and all of the ways people can find and or follow you. So that way people can benefit from all of the work and all of the growing and learning you've put in over the past, really your whole life, but especially over the past year that you've been expressing, so people can enjoy the fruit of your labor and you can be rewarded in a way that's well beyond monetarily. But I also just to encourage you, I know that God's going to just keep plugging away in your journey. I'm super excited for you. And
thank you.
You guys, as always, this is the Mindset Mastery Podcast, and we will see you on the other side. Peace.
God forbid you are sitting in this place saying, I don't care about legacy. You need to care about it because somebody's got to live in the life you have. You are passing something down whether you want to or not.